Hello for the feast of the dedication of John Lateran Church in Rome. And I'm using all three readings and going to talk about churches. Did you know that our bishop, Bishop Stowe, is out of the diocese for the month of November? He's making a private priest out west, a private retreat out west with a special Franciscan friend or whatever. And we are the Diocese of Lexington, with our priest making, our bishop making a retreat on this feast of the dedication of the most important church in the world, not only just in Rome, but in the world. Well, why? Let me sort of tell you why. It's because that was the original church of the first pope. And in that church, all the main papal programs or prayers and masses and ordinations and celebrations took place from way back, beginning in the 4th century. It was a cathedral of Rome which was given by Constantine, who gave this property, this land, and this church, this basilica, to the Roman Catholic Church. He received it from the Lateran family, a wealthy family, and he gave it to the church, the Roman Catholic Church. And so it's historical. It's the first Roman Catholic Church. It was a public building called a basilica, and the activities, the main activities of the Roman Catholic Church took place there from the 4th century up until the popes came back from Avignon in the 1400s. Isn't that interesting? Well, I find it to be. It's historical. And so this is the Church of Churches. Here it says in this little Ordo sleeve that this church is the mother and head of all churches of Rome and the world. Residents of the Pope from the 4th century until their moving to Avignon in 1309. Site of 5 ecumenical councils. Pope Innocent X commissioned the present structure in 1646. Until then, 1646. Beneath its high altar rests the remains of a small wooden table on which, according to tradition, St. Peter celebrated Mass dedicated to the Savior and later to John the Baptist. That's why it's called John Lateran. Wow, a lot of history. But that's where the Pope was. That's where the Pope started, the first Pope, Peter. And it started in Rome, and it developed into the Diocese of Rome with the bishop, which we call the Pope, is in charge. Today in our church, most people think that the center and the most important church in the world is St. Peter's in Rome. Well, that certainly is not true. Well, it is the most important, but it isn't the most important or historically. They began to build St. Peter's in Rome. It began April the 18th, 1506. And it was finished 120 years later, November the 18th, 1626. So it's from 1509 till 1626. And you know, that's the church. It's one of the most beautiful in the world. The dome was designed and built by Michelangelo. And the pillars above the altar and the Bernini columns with the golden bees, and there's history in that, or art history. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. You know, that dome, you know, that dome, you can climb up on a staircase which keeps on going around the dome all the way to the tippy top. And there's 551 steps. I know. I counted them. 551 steps. But that's the most important church, I guess, today, because there we have Pope Leo as our Pope, and that is where he has all the big celebrations and the canonizations and the outside masses. And it has been there and will be there for a long period of time. But nothing outdoes, historically speaking, St. John Lateran Church, the historical church. Churches. But churches aren't buildings. The churches are places where Christians assemble. They come together and pray. They come together and celebrate the Last Supper, our Eucharist. And that's the people, and what we celebrate, and celebrating the Last Supper of Jesus Christ is the key, of course. But we humans, we look to churches and we brag. What is the best church in the world? You might say John Lateran. Some would say, oh, no, it's St. Peter's. And I'm sure our bishop, even though he's on retreat, he might say, oh, the church in Lexington, Kentucky, my church, the Cathedral of Christ the King. That would be understandable, but I don't think it's true. Well, what is then, in reality, the most important church in your life? Well, I can tell you the best church. The best church in Lexington, Kentucky, or the Diocese of Lexington, is Pax Christi. Yeah, at least it is for me. Pax Christi. Where else can you find on a Sunday or a daily message or the presence of the peace of Christ, where we celebrate the peace of Christ in the liturgy, in the Eucharist, in Mass, at prayer? The church has a lot of rich history, and it begins with that Last Supper. And it jumps to that 4th century until the 14th century. And then it jumps from then until today. In the state of Kentucky, in the city called Lexington, in the parish church called Pax Christi, the peace of Christ. Don't you feel excited with that name and that reality? There, daily, the peace of Christ is celebrated. Have a good feast day of the dedication of John Lateran.